So, hello and welcome back yet again to recapping the wonderful final novel of the Enduring Flame trilogy, The Phoenix Transformed, by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory, on a day where I am really hoping that I am actually able to get this uploaded for you. Um, we lost power for about 3 hours already today. It's not cold, it's not even really raining, but the wind is howling. It's I mean, it kind of started right when I woke up this morning. The power already was flickering. And then right as I was doing the dishes, it went out, which was a massive bummer because I hadn't made dinner yet. Well, dinner, lunch. I eat, I try to eat like twice a day and have the main meal for me be in the middle of the day. And so, yeah, I was going to do dishes and get everything cleaned up and then make dinner and, eat dinner, sit down, probably do this video, upload it. Everything's perfect and wonderful. And I mean, I think as long as the power doesn't go out again, this will be fine. Unfortunately, everything today has been delayed by several hours due to a power outage. I did use my time quite usefully while the power was out. I was like, all right, what could I do while waiting for the power to come back on? And I was like, you know what I can do? I can clean my room and go through all of my clothing and actually face reality and put into the donations pile the stuff that just doesn't fit, which was a decent sized bag, which I will be taking to our local thrift store and donating probably early next week. I'll be going out again probably next week. So, yeah, do that and then maybe actually buy clothes that fit. I hate facing reality, but sometimes you have to do it. And shopping at pretty much nothing but thrift stores means that at least I'm not breaking the bank when I go and buy clothing, so it's it's fine. It's not fine. I really need to get a little bit better at this whole diet and exercise thing, but that's for another video. Anyway, like I said, we are going to jump back in and attempt to recap, and we're going to all cross our fingers that the lights stay on because I like electricity. I was not made to be someone living in pre-industrial times. I am a soft and weak modern person, and I face this about myself, and I admit it. So, anyway. Let's jump into chapter 16 as we recap The Phoenix Transformed by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory, and chapter 16 is titled Chasing Death. So, yeah, very aptly named title this time because we rejoin Harrier as he has done a finding spell and is chasing out after Lord whatever his name is. Good for me. I already forgot. Lord Parazal, I think. Anyway, or no, Farquaad or something. Now I'm just thinking Lord Farquaad from Shrek. But, same basic idea. Anyway, he is chasing after the 5 of the Aramethans who decided that they are leaving. They are heading back probably to an oasis or a city. They don't believe that Harrier can help them. I really think that a lot of it has to do with this noble who doesn't want to take orders, but it might not be. Um, but yeah, they took off, and Harrier seems to be the only one who thinks that maybe he should get them back. And I know Bonkers about Alice put in the comments of the last video, because I was like, I have to admit, I'm kind of with a lot of the rest of the Isvani. Just let them go. Maybe they'll keep Aniran distracted for a day or two. That probably would be my attitude. It's definitely not Harrier's, and yeah. But we're rejoining him, and he also told Shariah that he didn't want her coming with him because he loves her. I mean, not in exactly those words, but that is the way that Shariah took it, and I think that is the way he meant it. And Harrier turns and realizes that, he and his extra Shotars, as they are riding out for about a half an hour, he can hear behind him that some people are coming. Three of the Nelzindar, Sinarin, Lassarin, and Thadanat, and three of Xanatar's young hunters. And they are coming along and gonna help him out. You gotta think that Shariah probably was like, look, Harrier's going off on this crazy fool's errand. Somebody go with him. And who better to go than some of her Nelzindar, including her best friend Sinarin. Harrier doesn't really want them to go, but he's not going to waste the time to fight, so all he does is toss them the leads to the spare Shotars and try to urge his own Shotar to go a little bit faster. Thankfully, he does have his finding spell, but now thankfully he also has some of the Isvani along with him who can track if need be. Sinarin points after a couple more hours, which Harrier is really kind of shocked that it's taking them this long. He doesn't think, he can't really figure out how they got such a lead on him, but they are finally beginning to draw abreast of their 5 strays. And, Harrier's like, okay, this is terrible. But they're now in sight. So Harrier picks up the pace a little bit, and it says in the book, he was sure that he was going to kill his poor Shotar he was riding. That wasn't fair, but he wants to catch up with these people. Harrier had closed perhaps half the distance to the Aramethans when suddenly the sand somewhere in front of them seemed to explode. Jets of sand hung in the air as if the sand were water as a sandwalker lurched up out of its hidden burrow, the morning sun shining down on its black carapace. And Harrier is still too far away to really be of any use. He watches in stunned horror as the Shotars start to scatter, and he realizes that one of the Shotars is actually carrying double. He's extremely upset about that because they stole enough of them for everyone to have their own, but obviously at least one person thought that they wanted to ride double, and he watches as the Shotar that's riding, or that has a double load, actually stumbles, falls, and that is Mistress Pakaloon's. And another Shotar gets taken down and eaten instantly. And pretty much they go from chasing 5 people to 2 were sucked down into the sand. 1 is laying stunned on the desert, only saved because the Sandwalker was more interested in eating her camel than her. 1 just took off, the one that Mistress Pakaloon's fell off of. It just ran wild, actually managed to outrun the Sandwalkers. And 1 other person who Harrier comes running up to when he finally gets there and hopes that he'll be able to heal But then he realizes that the sandwalker, which I'm assuming is something like a ginormous scorpion covered with an or crossed with an antlion, just from the way they're described, but it basically tore one of the people they were pursuing, Master Friolax, in half. Harrier knows that he can't actually heal that, and he basically sits with the man while he takes his last couple of breaths, and then decides that, all right, you know, I need to at least go track Lord, why can I not retain this man's name? I literally just read it. Lord Feckelan? Anyway, I'll get to it. Lord F. He decides that he better go chase him. The only one that they've managed to actually save is Mistress Pelicans, who she is very upset. She's basically having a little hissy fit. She's like, he left me! He left me to die! And she tries to stop Harrier from following Lord Felican. Even Sinarin is like, look, just let the idiot go. But for whatever reason, Harrier just can't. Sinarin agrees to track Lord Felican because Harrier doesn't want to do another spell, and he mostly dismisses Mistress Palicoons, other than just tossing her a water skin and telling her just to stay. That probably wasn't the best plan, but we shall see that. Mistress Pelicans jumps on Harrier's back and starts beating at him with her now empty water skin because she seems to think he's going to abandon her. He does manage to get onto his Shotar, and she, like I said, she jumps on his back, claws at his eyes, and starts screaming phrases that his father would have probably beaten him for knowing. After a minute, he feels her being kind of ripped off his back. He thanks Sinarin because she holds Mistress Pelicans off of him so he can maybe go find Lord Felican. But he does turn to Mistress Pelicans and he says, what did you think you were doing? You were going to leave me, I know you were, said Mistress Pelicans defiantly. Leafa, or somebody, had actually managed to comb her hair out, Harrier saw. It was a color somewhere between gold and copper. He was sure whoever had managed that had told her to braid it as well, but she hadn't. It was tumbling free and shining all the way to her waist, obviously freshly washed. Harrier actually found himself wondering how she had managed that. I chased you all the way across the desert. I wasn't going to leave you after I had done that. Harrier caught Sinarin's eye and he shrugged. Sinarin let go of one of Mistress Pelican's arms, and Mistress Pelican yanked her arm free of the other Isvani's grip with a little huff of exasperation. You're angry with me, she said. I know you are. If Harrier was angry with anyone, it was with Lord Felican, who had almost certainly been the one responsible for dragging all of them out here and getting them all killed. Go find your chadar, your headscarf, and bring it back here, said Harrier. Then we'll go. Give me yours, she wheedled, coiling a lock of hair around her finger and gazing at him through her eyelashes. No, said Harrier. Go on, it's over there. I'm afraid. Go with me, she begged. No, he said again. Go and get it, and if you take too long, I won't leave without you, but I'll make you walk. Her pretend fear vanished like the flame of a torch. She glared at him. Somehow, she had managed to get a geshak, Isvani knife, and now her hand twitched toward it. Sinarin slapped her hand away, hard, and plucked the little knife from her sash. "That's my knife," said Mistress Pelicans. "She's stealing it." "It's not yours. You stole it first," said Harrier, feeling as if he were talking to a very small child. He was pretty sure that whatever position Mistress Pelicans had occupied in Lord Felican's household, it wasn't either as a private secretary or a chief steward. All things considered, though, he was just happy that she wasn't going to be sitting behind him while carrying a knife. They mount up, and Sinarin begins to track Lord Felican through the desert. This takes a lot longer than you would think, considering they just saw him running off, but it takes a couple more hours. Part of this is because Harrier doesn't want to go really fast, because now the sun is coming up and it is becoming extremely hot. It's the desert, and smart people don't move fast in the desert. They finally see him, thanks to Sinarin's tracking skills, and Harrier shouts to him. "Lord Felican," Harrier yelled, "we've come to bring you back to the camp. We brought water." There was no reaction to his hail from either man or Shotar. "Sun-touched," said Sinarin after a moment. "I will lead his poor beast back here, Harrier. Then we may go." Before Harrier could argue the point, Sinarin had goaded her Shotar across the sand. It was probably just as fast for her to do it as for Harrier to convince Mistress Pelicans to dismount while he did it. He didn't want to ride out to Lord Felican with her riding pillion behind him, because he had started to form the theory that she had been acting so strangely because she hated Lord Felican and maybe had been forced to come with him and had been hoping that he would die before he could get rescued. Harrier decided that when they got back, he would have to have either Shariah or Sinarin tell Mistress Pelican that she didn't have to stay with Lord Felican if she didn't want to. Then Sinarin reached the other Shotar. Harrier saw her reach for its bridle rope, and Lord Felican jerked up in his saddle, reaching for her quick as an adder, striking and grabbing her by the throat. He pulled her across the saddle, and her Shotar ran from beneath her. She scrambled helplessly at the wrists holding her, and for one sickening moment, Sinarin hung suspended by the hands around her throat, until Lord Felican's Shotar slumped to its knees and fell to its side dead. Lord Felican and Sinarin tumbled to the ground. Harrier, obviously, starts running. So does everybody else, even with Mistress Pelicans shrieking behind them. Fadanat and Larasan, remember they're both Nelzindar, passed him as he galloped forward. Neither bothered to wait for their Shotars to kneel when they reached the bodies tangled on the sand. Harrier saw the flash of Thundant's Awarden as he cut Lord Felican. No, as he cut Lord Felican's body, because no matter what Thundant did, the grip of his hands on Sinarin's throat did not relax, and the body did not bleed. Only when Thundant had chopped through its arms was Larasan able to pull Sinarin away, and by that time others had joined, helping her pull the severed limbs loose. Harrier took the time to force his Shotar to kneel, because others were behind him, and he didn't trust Mistress Pelicans not to ride off on her own. "Heal her," Larasan begged, clutching Sinarin's body across her lap. "Heal her, Harrier." Harrier knelt. One look at Sinarin's face told him everything that he needed to know. I can't heal the dead, Larasan, he said. He was cold, shaking, sick with rage, loss, and grief. How can I tell Shariah that I let her die? This was too much. This was... How many more must die before you realize that your fight is hopeless? A voice behind him asked. This wasn't grief. Not just grief. Harrier drew a deep breath and rose to his feet, drawing both of his selkin blades as he turned. Mistress Palikon stood beside his shotar, running her chadar through her hands. Her hair stirred in the hot wind, and she gazed at him, head tilted, a small smile on her lips. She reached out, casually, and stroked the shotar's neck. Harrier could see its eyes, maddened and white-rimmed with terror. How could he have missed what she had become? How could she have been overshadowed by an iron without him knowing? He could sense the taint in her now. So awful it was an effort for him to stand there, and no one could sense it but him. The two Isvani behind it, took a step forward. Get away from her, he said. Luru and Suram looked at his face and hurried to obey, pulling their shotars with them. How many? How many more must die? Said Mistress Palikons, or Aniran, swaying from side to side. Tell the truth? Lie? Somehow Harrier knew instinctively that neither was a good idea. If you don't know the answer to that, you aren't very powerful after all, he said. And as suddenly as the demonic presence had descended, it was gone. Mistress Palikons, wholly herself again, sprawled on her back in the sand. Harrier's shotar, free from an iron spell, scrambled to its feet with a bleat of terror and bolted. Mistress Palikons pushed herself onto her elbows and began to laugh hysterically. Doomed! All of you! All of us! You'll all be your creatures in the end, just as I! A spear flew past Harrier's shoulder, burying itself in Vianessa's Palicon's throat and pinning her body to the sand. He turned. Larasan was standing behind him, a second spear in hand, eyes murderous. All right, said Harrier. Let's do what we have to and leave. It takes them a while, because doing what they have to is basically taking every dead body, including that of Sinarin, his friend, and chopping it into pieces that can't be raised to kill others. While he's doing that, and while he's riding, he thinks, Sinarin, his friend, his ally. Losing her made Harrier ache. She had made him welcome from the moment he and Tercel had arrived in Abi Abadashar. She had teased him for what he didn't know of his Vani ways and marveled at his stories of Arameth. She had never refused to accompany the two of them, no matter where they ended up going, and she had never said that their impossible task was impossible. The worst of it was that his grief at losing her was mixed with relief. It was horrible that she was dead, and Harrier knew it was his fault, but he didn't think he could have lived with letting her die. Well, Aniran had told him that all he had to do to surrender was save her life. He would have sacrificed her. He thought he would have, but at least now he would never have to know. Mistress Palkuns was overshadowed by Aniran, Harrier said. She came and went. I think that she must have been Aniran's creature since Akaizas Atreyu, and I couldn't tell, except when Aniran was there. He also tells this when they get back to camp to Bisochim and Saravase, who are completely, utterly horrified, and Harrier wants to know from Bisochim if that can happen to everybody else. I need to know. Harrier stopped, thinking of his brother Eugene's, and he shuddered before he could stop it. Are they all like that? Are they all tainted? Can you tell? He asked Bisochim. Can you undo it? I would know, as you did, when Aniron was present, said Bisochim. Harrier, I healed all of them. I sensed nothing in any of them, even the one that you call Mistress Palcoon's. I would have thought I could set wards, bindings around those who remain. I cannot say how that such a spell could work, though, nor would its weaving outlast my life. Harrier is still dealing with shock, and he says no, of course it wouldn't last that long. Sinaran's dead. They're all dead. They stole food and they ran, and I went to bring them back, and they're dead. Harrier, said Saravase, go, lie down, rest. You did all you could. Her words struck him as preposterous, and Harrier wanted to laugh, but he knew if he started laughing, he just wouldn't stop. Did all I could. It wasn't enough. I haven't done enough from the very start. If I had, none of this would be in this mess. He mumbled something out loud, he didn't know what, and turned around and staggered off. And now we shift perspective, and we are going to go and see, from Tercell's perspective, the rest of the story in just a minute. Had to get a drink. All right, so we shift perspectives. We leave Harrier stumbling to a tent, and we go back in time a little bit to just after Tercell got healed from his goat bite, which left him feeling pretty terrible. And he runs into Shariah, who lets him know about the thefts and the fact that Harrier has gone off to bring back the Aramethans who stole from them and are now running off into the desert. You let him go alone? Tercell had asked. He said he would not allow me to ride by his side, Shariah had answered, her eyes wide and unreadable. He said that it would slay his heart did he, by his action, allow one who he loved to fall into the hands of Aniron. Oh? Tercell wondered if Shariah had misunderstood what Harrier had said, or if Harrier had meant to say it. He decided that she probably hadn't misheard him, but that it was something Harrier would rather not have anyone know, himself included. At least Shariah had sent Sinaran and whoever else that she could grab in half a chime after Harrier, so he wasn't quite alone. After that, Tercell was far too keyed up to sleep, even exhausted as he was. During the long, nerve-wracking hours of waiting for news, he did what Harrier had meant to do. He went and explained everything about their situation to Cave and Eugene's and Magistrate Parazel. Everything that they told him in return terrified him, because it simply wasn't true. They told him all the things that Mistress Palcoon's had overheard as she had wandered around the camp. And Tercell supposed Mistress Palcoon's might have wandered around the camp. No one would have stopped her, but she could not have heard what she told them that she had heard. They did not have stockpiles of food hidden in their tents. They weren't within a day's ride of the Atreyu cities. The cities weren't intact. the wells along the road weren't intact either. If the wells and the oases had gone dry, then the wells of the border cities certainly had. Tercel didn't know why Mistress Palacoons would say things like that. Not until the Isvani who had ridden with Harrier got back. And that's when they find out that, yeah, Mistress Palacoons was under Aniran's control from the very beginning. And Tercel also finds out that all of the people that Harrier went to bring back are dead, and that Sinarin is dead as well. And Harrier basically passes out. I mean, he did a fairly big spell right after fighting off the black dog attack, which caused, he did a fairly big, not really spell for that. I don't think the water bind actually counts as a spell, but yeah, Harrier passes out. One good thing, if anything good could be said to be coming of this, is Shariah and the other tribal leaders decide, since so many of their supplies were stolen and so many animals died, that they're going to break into some of the hoarded food themselves, and at least instead of just having broth tonight, they can at least thicken it up with some of the vegetable paste and almost have something that kind of resembles stew. And then they have a very long meeting while Harrier is asleep, trying to figure out what to do with the 3 northerners that are left. Some of the leaders want the 3 northerners to be killed. Some of them just want them guarded. Some of them want to wait and see what Harrier has to say. By the time everyone had gotten a chance to have his or her say, more for the chance to state their position publicly than anything else, the meeting had gone on for hours, and it had ended very much the way Shariah had told Tercel that it would when they had gone into it. Eugene's Cave and Magistrate Parazel would be allowed to live, and Harrier would be expected to treat them no differently from anyone else. He wouldn't, said Tercel to Shariah. Not even this Eugene's, who is of his blood. Tercel knew that in the South, becoming a wild mage meant severing all ties with family. Shariah knew that the customs were different in the North, but she was suspicious of what acknowledging the ties of kinship might mean for Harrier. He wouldn't make exception even for me, said Tercel. And no, not for you Jens either. If Jens did something wrong and Harrier didn't think he could be fair, he would tell someone else to decide. You, Kamar, Xanatar, Leofa. He would hate whoever brought justice down upon the head of his kin, said Shariah. Not if it was fair. I don't think so, said Tercel. He'd be more likely to hate his brother for breaking the rules, but it won't happen. Don't sell the calf before it's been born, said Shariah. We switch perspectives again to Harrier waking up to reality. I mean, waking up, period, but also having everything that happened in the last 24 hours kind of hit him upside the head. And he realizes that his brother is in the tent with him. I'm sorry, said Eugene's in a low voice. Eugene's was sitting on the carpet a few feet away from Harrier's sleeping mat. Harrier wondered how long he had been there. Light hair, I'm sorry. I didn't think. My own fault, said Harrier. I should have had you guarded. He saw Eugene's wince at the truth. You shouldn't have to guard people whose lives that you saved to keep them from stealing from you. And is it true about Mistress Palacoons? Tercel said, "She was overshadowed by an iron," said Harrier. "I'm sorry," Eugene said again, "for lying to you, for everything. They wanted us to come with them. She said that she had overheard some of the women saying that you were heading away from the Atreyu cities. Lord Felican said that there would be water and supplies there." "They were headed in the opposite direction," said Harrier. "Why didn't you guys go with them?" "Heliphan, Magistrate Parazel, she thought that she should stay. She said it was her responsibility, even if you didn't think so. Cave said that he would stay if she did, and I'm your brother, Harrier. I couldn't just go off and leave you, could I?" Harrier tossed his boots aside, and he stumbled over to kneel awkwardly at his brother's side. Eugene's put his arms around him, and Harrier hugged him hard. "You jackass. We're all going to die here, you know that, right?" said Harrier. "Yeah," said Eugene's. "But Nadinia and the kids, they're home and they're safe. Guess I might as well die here with you as out in the desert with a bunch of other jackasses." "Yeah, you're probably going to get the chance for that," said Harrier. And so, at least out of all of this, Harrier and his brother kind of make up. Harrier eats, and, he stops to think how 2 mugs of thick broth after a couple of months of 2 mugs of pretty much nothing but water with a little bit of salt in it almost does feel like a feast. And then he goes and he talks to Shariah, and the authors and Tercel and everybody else kind of leave them alone for that. The next day, they pack up the camp, and hopefully they're thinking that maybe another day or 2, no more than 5, hopefully they'll reach Sapathuk Oasis. Tercel thinks to himself, but what then? No help was coming from the north. Tercel glanced at Magistrate Parazel. The commission had already been out of touch with Arameth for 2 or 3 moon turns, and if Magistrate Vaunel was going to investigate or notify the Elven Queen, she already would have. Dragon-bound elven mages could be here in less than a day, so they probably weren't coming at all. Tercel realized that he had been thinking, even before Ankildar had been taken away from him, that he wasn't the only one who had to be responsible for this. All along, he thought in the back of his mind that Arameth could take over if he failed, that the Elf City could take over if he failed, that Harrier could take over if he failed, that if he failed, it just meant that the Eternal Light would send somebody else to take over the job of destroying the Shadow. And it wasn't true. If Bisochim could not destroy an iron, and he couldn't, then Harrier couldn't, Knight Mage or not. Now that Tercel had spent more time talking to Magistrate Parazel, he really understood just how little idea they would have in Arameth about what to do with a demon, and Lord Felican probably wouldn't be the only one who would think it was a good idea to bargain with her. As for the elves, they were great people, but they had known that this was going to happen since before Tercel had been born, and they had not done anything about it except wait for him to show up so that they could, not tell him anything. And he just couldn't say, "It'll be okay. Another High Champion of the Light will be born." Because even if he and Harrier and Bisochim all died without falling to the dark, Aniran was going to get what she needed somewhere else, or just go off and hide, or do both. And okay, maybe another high champion mage of the light would be born eventually. But that would just mean there would be another war, like the one that had ended in the Great Flowering, and Tercel knew more than anybody other than the elves about what that war had been like. And the idea that there could be another one, that made him want to cut his own throat right then. Because if there was another war in 10 years or a century, or even in 10 centuries, the creatures of light were going to lose. All along, Harrier had been saying that he was not Kellen the poor orphan boy, and he was right, he wasn't. Harrier was not Kellen. And as for Tercel, he wasn't an Adalia or a Germain or whoever he was supposed to be playing in this unfunny farce. And Tercel doubted very much that there would be any more heroes around whenever Aniron decided to destroy them, any more than there were now. He was scared to death. Harrier had said all along that all they had to do was survive long enough for someone else to notice that Aniron was loose, because if they could manage to do that, then somebody else could stop her. He had clung to that one fact, using it to keep himself and keep all of them alive as long as he could. But it wasn't true. It wasn't even that no help was coming. It was that there was no help anywhere. And that massive bummer of a paragraph is where that chapter ends. I think if this were a movie, this would be that darkest hour phase of the movie. I mean, I would not put it past James Mallory and Mercedes Lackey, given how brutal this trilogy is compared to the first one, which was pretty dark and brutal. I would not put it past them to end with the bad guys winning, but would it actually be one of my very favorite series if that had happened? I guess you're just going to have to wait and see. Anyway, that is the end. And the lights actually stayed on. I am still seeing the trees doing this outside. But you know what? The power has stayed on. Knock on wood. Fingers crossed that it stays on long enough for me to upload. I mean, honestly, knock on wood, fingers crossed that it just doesn't go out again, because, like I said at the beginning, I am a soft and whiny modern person who likes her electricity and internet and hot water and all of those other modern things. I would have made a terrible pioneer. I would probably have made a terrible person marching across the desert with Tercel and Harrier. I like to read about these things. I don't think living them would be all that much fun. So I'm not going to talk too much longer. I am going to get this uploaded, hopefully, so that there is a video tonight. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please do leave me a thumbs up. It does always make me, like, seriously, I say it every time, but it is true. Like, the little thumbs up makes me smile. It makes me happy. I don't know if it does anything for YouTube, but it makes Christine happy. So, you know, you could hit it if you want. I guess if you don't want to, that's fine too. Anyway, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.